Okay, we're good to go.
I'm not slides, but it's all good because I have them on another computer with me.
You can't see the slides?
I cannot. Can you all in the chat see the slides? Let me see what the chat says. Yep, they see us, they see the slides. So we can advance.
Able to see.
I can't see it, but that's okay. I'll just follow along.
Okay.
All right, so thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again for bearing with us. Really sorry for the technical difficulties, but what we will do is share the recording of the slides as a follow-up to this meeting. So I just want to take a quick second to introduce myself. My name is Angelina Darrisaw, and I am here as a part of the Digital Coaches Program. The Grow with Google Digital Coaches Program offers free resources and tools to Black and Brown business owners all across the United States. So currently there are coaches in 10 different markets, and what the coaches do is provide free training, free coaching to help the success and also create accessibility to digital resources for business owners across the US. Moving to slide 2, please, Aisha. You can see here some of my information and how you can get in contact with me. If you have any follow-up questions, always feel free to reach out. Feel free to follow us on social. And if you like anything that you heard today, feel free to hashtag at hashtag Google Digital Coaches. So please do reach out. On the next slide, just want to take a second to introduce our amazing partner who can share all the great things that she does for herself. But the content we're going to share today, both Aisha and I have presented as trainers who have worked with the Grow with Google program. So Aisha is very familiar and will be jumping in and sharing some of the insights as she presents as well. I'd also like to highlight that we both have a background as coaches. I've run a coaching firm in business for 5 years. And having that background, we can definitely speak to the importance of leveraging coaching philosophies within your teams and how it can be a game changer as you plan your journey to a successful role and collaborative team. So I'm going to turn it over to Aisha to introduce herself.
Thank you, Angelina. Still trying to post a new link and everything. Hi, everyone. Aisha Taylor Issah here, founder and CEO of the Sistahs in Business Expo. We are the country's only multi-city small business expo created to celebrate entrepreneurial women of color. Really excited to be with you all tonight. Angelina is a dear friend and colleague. I am also an instructor at the New York City Grow with Google Learning Center, which is one of the physical locations where we provide free training and resources for small business owners, entrepreneurs, educators, career professionals, job seekers. And so I've been doing that for a year now since the center opened. I'm also the co-owner and chief consultant of Tailor Made Professional Career Consulting, where my sister and I have been doing individual career consulting and recruiting for over 15 years. And so really excited. I'm also a huge beneficiary of the National Google Coaches Program. I began attending events with Angelina back when I first launched the Sistahs in Business Expo. And since that time have just really immersed myself in that community. And it's been a tremendous blessing to my business, and I'm grateful to be a partner now. So thank you again.
Thank you. Now moving to the next slide, slide 4. The key thing that I want to point out on this slide, we see the number 65%. Any of you want to type in the chat what you think that number represents? I'll give just a second to take from the chat. 65%. What do you think this represents? And we're talking about coaching and teams. Okay, I hear no chat guesses yet, but that is okay. When we think of 65%, what I want you to think of is the number of startups that fail due to people-related issues. Yes, Kelly shares disengaged employees. 65% of startups fail due to people-related issues. I think this is really important when we think about the landscape of business. because it's not just about your core product and service. That does make a difference to the ultimate success of your business, but if you're only focusing on those elements, you're missing a key piece of what it takes to make your business work, what it takes for your business to be successful. And people-related issues is really a key challenge that a lot of small businesses don't put a lot of emphasis on. So what we want to talk about today are some of the ways in which we can prepare you.
You went on mute for a second, Angelina.
So what we want to.
You're on mute again. Okay. It's muted again. Okay. Why does that keep happening? Okay.
So what we want to talk about today are some of the people-related issues and how we can alleviate some of the key challenges that come up when it comes to people-related issues. On slide 5, Aisha, let's look at some of the ground rules that we'll just have for this conversation. So I want to just talk about the fact that people is where we're going to be spending our energy today when we think about the landscape of business. And there might be some things that are already in your mind in terms of what works for you when it comes to dealing with people on your team and what doesn't work. I want you to be open. I want you to be open to changing your perspective, to thinking about the lens of other folks on your team, and to be open to new information as we go through this webinar today. I also want you to be brave. We are going to talk about some sensitive topics when it comes to people-related issues. And I want you to just be thinking about how you can have courage in this conversation and really push yourself and challenge yourself to think about some areas of opportunity for yourself as a leader. And I also want you to feel really engaged and open to interrupting, to chiming in with questions in the chat, and to asking whatever it is you'd like to know when it comes to some of these issues. So those will be some of our ground rules for today. On the next slide, when we think about our agenda today, we're going to talk about what it is that makes a good manager. And I know many of you have had your own experiences either as a manager yourself or having been managed, and there are some things that you've seen work. I want you to chime in the chat and share some of those things. Then we'll talk about what it means to coach your team effectively. What does coaching actually mean? We hear so many different folks in the coaching space, and there's a whole lot of variety when it comes to defining what it means to be a coach. And today we're gonna kind of break down what coaching leadership styles include and what it really means. And then we're going to talk about how you can grow through effective delivery of feedback. So that's our plan for the next couple of minutes. So first, before we go to the next slide, sticking on this agenda slide for a second, I want to hear from some of you in the chat. What do you think makes...
You went to mute again. Okay. Okay. You're muted. Okay. You're muted. Okay, so while Angelina gets that straight, and it looks like some of you have already started to answer, her question was, what do you think are some of the attributes of a good manager? So go ahead and share those in the comments. So far we have being able to communicate, empathy and compassion, someone who has experience in what you are asking from your employees. All good, all good. Being organized. Mm-hmm.
And so let's move to the next slide, Aisha.
Okay.
Looking at some of the attributes that we're going to call out and focus on today, I'd like to start with creating an inclusive environment. So even in this time, this day and age right now in Corona crisis, one of the things that I've been chatting with some of the managers of teams who I work with a bit is making sure that we even are thinking about the fact that everyone has a different home life situation right now. So working remotely and working from home can look very different for one person on your team than it can for another who also has to deal with homeschooling their children right now, or who may have many different roommates and has a hard time finding quiet space in their home if they're not used to working from home. In all aspects of management, it's really important that we consider and think about what does the scene look like for everyone on our team, and not just center what our expectations are on our own experiences. It's also really important that good managers are empowering their teams. When you're finding yourself in a situation where you're inclined to micromanage or really struggling to delegate, I think it's important to think about what's driving this for me. And sometimes it might be just, I haven't explained it well enough. I think I'm the only one who can do it. And I don't know for myself how to translate this process to people on my team. So instead of not delegating, the right thing to do is figure out, how do I better communicate what my expectations are to my team? How do I empower them to actually be successful in the tasks that I'm asking them to complete? That's what you really want to focus on as a good manager. So we have creating an inclusive environment, thinking about encouraging everyone.
So while she gets her sound back, one piece that I usually like to highlight, you back?
Yes, I'm back. Please highlight it though, jump in.
Well, one piece I usually like to highlight this is I think that the term micromanagement has gotten a bad rap. That it has a lot of negative connotations. And if we're honest, right, that there are some instances where micromanagement to a degree is necessary, right? What you don't want to be is on the far end or the bad end of micromanagement, right? So in the comments, can you share some times when you think that micromanagement might be necessary? Because we don't want to completely, follow this idea that micromanagement is a terrible thing at all times. It does not have to be. And I do feel that there are some times as a manager where you do have to provide a little more oversight or a little more support for your team members. So, right. So Kelly says when it's a new employee, right?
Yes.
When members of the team are really newer in experience. Exactly, right? And so we don't have to, subscribe to this idea that micromanagement just means, not trusting your team or not allowing them to operate in their strengths, but that sometimes it's just a matter of needing to check in a little more often or giving smaller tasks at first to be sure they can handle them before you give them greater tasks. And so we want to be on the good side of micromanagement where it actually empowers the team members rather than just breathing down someone's neck all the time.
Absolutely. And then we also want to support career development and talk about performance regularly with members of our team. So one of the most frustrating things that has happened to me in my career is when I'm not given clear expectations of how I'm expected to perform and then told, oh, well, we couldn't promote you, or we couldn't give you the thing that you wanted because you didn't meet expectations. A good manager should really be mapping out those metrics of success with their employee and having regular feedback conversations around what that employee's performance is to support them. And if you think about it as a manager, this actually is going to be what's most effective for you getting your needs met. And whatever the goals are of your team, you want the people on your team to perform well, because ultimately that helps further your goals and push your work forward. It's also really important.
So she says, it's also really important to be a good coach. Usually I save this one because the entire next section is on coaching. So we're going to really go into more detail about what it means to be a good coach. Are you okay with that, Angelina? Okay, so we're going to actually go to the next one, which is being a good communicator.
Yes, and when we think about what it means to be a good communicator, it's about encouraging that open dialogue with your team, making sure that you're transparent, thinking about the timing of right now, for instance, and we've seen all the emails. I've gotten so many emails from anyone who I've ever given my email address to about their response to Corona, right? But not just thinking about how you're communicating your response to crisis with your clients, you also want to think about, am I clearly communicating how we're responding to things with my team? Am I being transparent with processes? Because that also encourages buy-in from all of the members of your team. You also want to make sure you have a clear vision and strategy for the team. I love this one because I think about the Alice in Wonderland quote where she's saying, well, where am I going? And he says back to her, the rabbit says back to Alice, if you don't have a destination in mind, you'll get somewhere. The question is really just where. And for you to best support your team, it's important for you as the leader to be thinking about, have I been very clear and transparent with what my vision is for the team and what the strategies we're going to employ to get there? So that's really important. You want to make sure that you're really focusing on results, that you're able to translate that strategy into KPIs for your team, that you're really being clear and communicating who owns what task, so everyone knows that the role that they're playing on the team. I think this is really important, again, as many of us are working remotely, especially now. Some of the tools that you can employ to be results oriented and to help everyone stay on track and productive are project management tools where you can share the status of where you are in different projects, and everyone on the team can really clearly see what the expectations are of them. So you want to think about project management tools like a Trello, like an Asana. If you use the Google suite of tools for business, you want to think about really leveraging those shared documents to help everyone see what their roles and responsibilities are on all projects. You also want a really collaborative environment, especially when you have a smaller team.
So back, okay.
Please jump in, Aisha.
Yes.
I'm gonna.
So collaboration is, really, really important. We don't operate in silos. The work that we do more than likely impacts or requires the support and the expertise of others, whether it be other subject matter experts, other teams, other business owners, other departments. And so we, I think especially as small business owners, sometimes we feel like we have to just focus on our own business. We're trying to grow on our own, but there really is growth in collaboration that, old saying, go far, go alone. I mean, if you want to go far, go with someone. And so we definitely encourage collaboration as a part of being a good manager, and that starts from the top down.
Absolutely. So it's really important that we foster those environments that encourage collaboration. The next piece that's really important to think about is being a strong decision maker. People are looking to you on your team for you to be the visionary, that you can make those tough decisions and that you're demonstrating your leadership by doing that. So what does that look like? That means the hard pieces, the ones where maybe in your gut, you're saying, I don't know. You still have to have a firm perspective and own that. Own the perspective you choose, because your team is looking to you to be the one that really helps guide the direction of the team and where you should go. So how do you come across and clearly communicate those decisions? You want to try to get consensus and buy-in when you can, but ultimately as the leader, your role is to be the key decision maker.
Right. I always say, no one likes a wishy-washy manager or leader. You have to be able to be firm in your decisions and be able to support them. And that means there are going to be times when there are not easy decisions. They're going to be tough decisions. Really quick, one example that I had recently, I had to make the decision to postpone our expo, right, because of the coronavirus. And initially, that morning when everything was just kind of really becoming heightened, I scheduled a call with my team for later that evening so that we could talk about the possibility of postponing. But then as the reports continued to come in and the mandates were coming from government, you know, I couldn't wait. I could not wait for the call with my team to hash it out. I had to go ahead and make a decision that morning that we were going to postpone. And so then the nature of our call changed from whether or not we're going to postpone to how we're going to implement the postponement. So, you know, everything can't always be a democracy. There are going to be some times when you're in tough places and you're going to have to make tough decisions, and they might not be decisions that the team members like. But you always want to think about the greater good and how it's going to support your overall mission and goal of the organization.
And then the last one is making sure you have those key technical skills. So earlier in the chat, when we asked what makes a good manager, one of you said what makes a good manager is being able to actually do the work and have a knowledge set of the work that the rest of the team does. This is exactly the point. You want to make sure that you can fill in if anyone is not available, that you're also demonstrating that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work with the rest of your team, that you understand if they're having challenges, you should have an understanding from having done the work to how to help them alleviate the challenges, because that's going to earn you the trust with the team that helps them say, you know, you get what I'm going through, you get the unique challenges that come with my role, therefore I'm going to value your advice, I'm going to value your insights differently. So you want to make sure that you have experience actually doing the work that the team is requiring, right? So now let's dive in a little bit deeper to the role of what it means to be a good coach. So I want to ask all of you in the chat if you could just share what you think it means when you think about being a good manager. Why is being a good coach a part of being a good manager? And I'll give you a couple seconds to respond. Anyone? Don't be shy.
Why is being a good coach a part of being a good manager? Okay.
Emanuela says being able to teach your team to be self-sufficient. Okay. Empowering employees to be solution-driven. Leadership is about bringing people with you. It's about listening. If you're a good coach, then you know how to teach. Okay. Thank you all so much for sharing that. A lot of folks are saying +1 to listening. Okay, this is really helpful. So yeah, so let's move to the next slide. Being a good coach is really about a lot of the things that you all called out. I think when we think about coaching, it's really important to have a baseline understanding of what it means to be a coach. And when we think about coaching, I will just give you a bit of a background. Coaching is actually a 2,000-year-old practice. It's a Socratean practice when it's really defined as that process of asking questions to drive someone's own discovery process. So the key piece when it comes to thinking about what it means to be a good coach is, how do I help drive self-discovery of the people I'm engaging with and interacting with? We can move to the next 2 slides. And coaching is also, in that process of self-discovery, it's about helping to unlock potential. I love that phrase, because everyone is truly capable, but everyone has a different experience. A couple of you talked about teaching, and to an extent, you know, when you think about your role as a manager, part of your role as a manager is about teaching skills, but your role as a coach is really about, how do I drive learning for the people on my team? It's less about me sharing. I always like to make the comparison between what it is to be a mentor and what it is to be a coach. And when we think about mentorship, I am using my experience, my lived experience, to get to a pivotal point of, you know, success or whatever it is, and I'm sharing you what I've done. But in reality, everyone has different circumstances. Me starting a role today is going to be completely different than what it was for you, even if you started in the same role at the same company 5 years ago. Why? Because technology has changed, the team has changed, expectations have changed. So we can't expect that everyone should follow the exact same journey. Instead, what we should do is help people to understand how they learn what's going to work best for them in that journey. And I think another important thing to call out here is that when someone is driving their own solutions, they're more likely to want to follow through with things. So being a good coach as a manager is important because it really helps empower and engage your team. I always think about the example of growing up and being told that you had to wash dishes or clean the bathroom. How motivated are you to do that, right? Usually not so much. But then there were those days where I came home from school and I was just feeling helpful. And I would say, you know what, let me help clean up around here. And I've self-motivated to do that. And that engagement is just different. I'm more motivated. I'm more excited to complete the task when I figured out, oh, when I clean up, I get this great response from the people in my family. That makes me happier. I found my own way to be motivated.
Mm-hmm. I think one part of this that I love is that piece about helping them to learn rather than teaching them. And I would love to see in the comments if anyone has any ideas or what you think an example of that would be. What would be an example of helping someone to learn rather than teaching them? And it could be anything. A lot of times people use sports analogies. One that I often use is think about if you wanted to learn how to fish, for example, the most random thing from a Brooklyn girl, right? But if you were interested in learning how to fish, right? And I took you out to the lake and I said, okay, here we have some bait, a hook, and a rod, right? And I tell you, okay, we have to put the bait on the hook, we have to put the hook on the rod, we swing the rod back, we throw it into the water, and we wait. I've just taught you how to fish, right? But if I take you to the lake with those same items and I say, here we have some bait, a hook, and a rod, what do you think we could do with these items to catch a fish? Now I'm helping you to learn rather than just teaching you how to fish. And so that's what you do in coaching. You present the tools, the possible options and resources to the coachee, and then help them to figure it out, because you never know, they might have a better idea on how to catch the fish than my old school way of putting the bait on the hook and the hook on the rod. And so it's things like that really help us to differentiate, because it can sometimes be a blurry line for folks who are new to it or who are really trying to begin implementing it and not really see the difference. And if you're not careful, you will teeter over into teaching rather than actually coaching.
So let's just
say giving them resources.
Give them resources, celebrate small victories. Absolutely. And I will just say, there's also something very rewarding about that process and experience of learning how to do something myself as opposed to just being told. So that example that Aisha gave, I want all of you to just think about moments in your career where you figured out something yourself and how that experience was different versus when you were directed. Tiffany says a strengths-based approach and family-centered coaching in human and social services. For what is your vision of the American dream might be a question she asked, and figuring out ways to help them achieve their dream. Very, very good. Thank you for commenting. So looking at the next slide, I think one of the things that can come up a lot for managers is this idea of, when do I coach and when am I leveraging my role as a manager where I have to be directive? And that's something that we have to really understand how to flex our approach based on circumstances, because it will change. There are times as a manager where you have to do many different things. You do have to teach, you have to onboard, you have to be a mentor in some cases, and you're also asked to be a coach. So there's so many different roles and hats that you wear. So I think that when you're trying to figure out what is the role and where do I stand, there are going to be those times where you have to be very directive. But when you're thinking about the opportunities to develop your talent, that's when you lean more on the side of the coaching. So when you're thinking about how can I help this person grow in this capacity or grow a skill set, how can I help them really define what success looks like for them in this position, that's going to be where you take on more of that coaching role. So it's more focused on the individual's development when you're thinking about that role as a coach. Next slide, please. So today we're just going to talk about some easy takeaways that you can implement into your coaching leadership role right now, or your role as a leader coach. And there are a couple good things that you can easily employ. So part of it is just thinking about being a more active listener. Oftentimes, I love, there's this, I think about Rosie Perez in one of those movies, and she has this quote where she's like, I know you're listening to me, but are you hearing me? And it's really important for the folks on our team to feel heard. So it's not just often as managers, we're thinking about the results. We're thinking about the bottom line. You want to just get to what it is that makes me tick, or, can solve the problem. But when you're stepping into that role of the coach and you're thinking about how do I develop this skill set in this person, it's important to help that employee feel understood and help them understand that you're seeing their perspective. So you want to acknowledge that you're hearing their side. I hear you. I see you. Also, when you think about how you can easily bring up this practice of coaching in your style today, it's about asking, right? So I talked about that Socratean practice of asking questions. You want to have those powerful questions that help your team, your staff understand what's really behind what it is they're going through or their challenges. So you want to get really into the root of what some of their issues are, asking those open-ended questions, really listening to understand. I like to think about being curious during this process. So truly trying to understand what is their lens on a situation is really important. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So when we think about good listening, what do you think makes a good listener? You can just type into the chat and we can go to the next slide, and I'll share some thoughts and comment on your comments once you type in. So there's a couple different ways in which we can look at listening. There are 3 key levels of listening to understand, and that first level is really just that present, very passive. We all do it. I think about how I'm able to, for instance, complete tasks while I'm also having a conversation or sitting on a conference call, right? That's that very passive. I'm not fully present. And this is really the listening we want to get the most away from. We want to bring presence into our work with our teams as much as possible. Level 2 listening is really more of bringing that presence in and getting at a deeper level. So that's really focused listening. A good example of that is thinking about if you've ever been in a restaurant with a significant other or someone you like, and it's kind of like everything else disappears. So you're just like lost in the conversation and so engaged. Your focus is really more on the facts of what they're saying. So you're paying a lot of attention to facts that make sense to you at that point. When we talk about level 3 listening, this is really important because this is the highest level of presence. And this is about bringing some of that empathy into the conversation. So when I'm having level 3 listening, I'm really engaged, but I'm engaged in the whole picture of you, right? So I might be paying attention to what your body language is saying to me when we're talking. I'm paying attention to how this environment that we're sitting in might be affecting you. The stories, what are the feelings that are coming across? I'm really suspending my agenda. I think oftentimes one of the easiest things to do is to listen with an answer in our mind. But when you're engaged in that level 3 listening, I'm not thinking about what I'm about to say. I'm not thinking about my assumptions of you and who you are. I'm listening to understand and suspending my own judgment. So when you're in a coaching conversation, where do you want to be? Do you want to be at level 1, level 2, or level 3? And you also can just type in the chat. Level 3, level 3, level 3. Yeah, so you definitely want to be more on that side. And because, again, listening with our own agenda in our minds is the easiest thing to do, that means that we want to sometimes be prepared for these coaching conversations. We want to ourselves take a second. There's always so much going on throughout the day when you're leading. Again, managers have so many different competing priorities. So when we're knowing that we're about to prepare ourselves for a coaching conversation, I like to go through it. The process is called clearing, where it's, for me, sometimes taking a deep breath, silencing my phone, and just reminding myself, here is my opportunity to develop someone else, pay attention to someone else, and I have to shut down some of the own distractions that are around me so I can fully engage in that level 3 listening. In the chat, also feel free to type in some of the things you do to prepare yourself for that level 3 listening. Someone in the chat also wrote, it's important to perceive using all your senses, the nonverbals, the body language, the tone. Yes, I've had some of the richest conversations with some of the folks that I've coached when I'm really looking at, hey, you just said one thing to me, but your body language said something completely different. And that's how I'm able to get at what the truth actually is for that person sometimes. One of the questions, someone said meditating before a coaching conversation. That's a great one. How vulnerable should you be in sharing and in listening? What happens to managers when folks use your vulnerability against you? And then someone else wrote, then that's not a good manager. I think we should come back to that question because it's really important, and I want to make sure that we give some time to that. But let's move to the next slide, and we'll table that response for a little bit later. Now, when it comes to good asking, what do powerful questions look like? What are the questions that really help someone else define the root of where their areas of development are? I think that this all starts with, for one, getting away from yes and no questions immediately. Those typically imply an agenda. You want to make sure you're not using so this is what you're thinking, right? Unless, of course, you're affirming what someone has just said. So let's look at the next slide. What does it mean to ask open-ended questions? When you're asking open-ended questions, I actually love this process because I'm curious about people. I like to know really what's going on in the minds of people that I'm working with. And I think this is a great opportunity to deepen relationships. So think about it from that lens. These are people who, if you are a small business owner and you're a coaching leader, then you have the opportunity to really learn about people who are investing their time in building your business. And that's a phenomenal opportunity and one to be excited about. So asking that open-ended questions, really begin with why. What's driving that thought for you? Why do you think that? Why did you make the decision that you made? Why do you feel this way instead of this way? And really trying to get that person to open up and explore more of their own thoughts is really important, because a lot of times the person you might be coaching may not have a whole lot of time for their own reflection. So when you step into this role and you're asking those open-ended questions, you're giving the person that you're working with an opportunity to reflect, and you're being that feedback partner that they can bounce their ideas off of. So a good tip for you is to ask yourself, when you're asking these questions, if you are asking questions for your own information gathering, or if you're actually trying to help the person that you're working with have some discovery about themselves. So we're not asking these questions to be nosy. We're not asking these questions, to fulfill our own interests. We really are asking these questions to make sure our clients have some discovery. Next slide, please. Mm-hmm. And also, Aisha, feel free to jump in at any point. So when we're talking about active listening in a coaching conversation, I love to think about how important it is to make sure we're doing less of the talking. And actually, there's a great way to remember this when you're going into a coaching conversation. And this is an acronym called WAIT. WAIT. why am I talking, right? Because this is really about the other person. This is about their discovery, their development, their process. So you should really not be driving most of that. It's okay to be silent. If there's silence from the person who you just asked a question, that's also a good thing. Don't feel the need to fill that space, because they may be using that time to actually explore what it is you've asked them. And really, you might have provoked a lot of thought and discovery for them that they need a moment to explore. So just remember before you speak that you should always ask yourself, why am I talking? Wait, why am I talking? Next slide, please. So there's a couple good questions that you can use when you're getting started in coaching. And the first is really trying to assess what's happening. What is the situation? These questions are really to help you understand what's the current state, what's the current situation. You're really focusing not so much on the past at all when you're in coaching conversation. You're really thinking about what's presently happening and how do I develop this person for a future, their future outcomes and goals that they may want to meet. So you want to bring them to the present moment and really understand what's happening right now. When you think about what's most important, asking this sort of question is really trying to help them understand their goals, where they may want to go, and what's next for them. And then the last question, and this is the one that I love to spend the most time on, is really thinking about how do we get there? What is the plan? And as a manager, it's really important that you're laying out or helping to guide that process for the person on your team, where they can figure out tactically, okay, I know where I am now, what's happening. I know where I want to go, what's most important. Now, here is where I need to define what's my strategy going to be to help get me to that place I want to go. Yeah. And next slide. So I'm going to give you all another acronym, and this is the GROW model. So we have WAIT already. Don't forget about WAIT. And we also now have GROW. So when you think about GROW, this will help you work just with a basic framework around coaching that you can leverage with your team. The G in GROW is all about the goal. What is the goal that is desired? The R is really about the reality. Where am I presently? The O is about the options. What are my paths forward? Because we always have options, right? So where can I go with where I am presently? And then will. What are the steps that I plan to take? Really, with that will part, as you're closing your coaching conversation, it's really important to really assess the employee's motivation. What is going to help keep you accountable to the steps that you've identified that you're going to take? Those are some of the follow-up questions you may ask when you're there. So let's dive deeper on the next slide into the GROW coaching model. And I want to share with you some of the questions you can ask at every stage. So when you're looking at goals, you first want to be asking questions along the lines of, what is the goal? How can I be helpful to this goal? So a good example of this is you might have someone on your team who's saying, I really want to be promoted. I think I'm ready to take on more. And you want to help them define, well, what is really what you're trying to get to next? Are you looking for more responsibility? Are you looking for help them get really narrow in defining what their end goal is? What are their innermost needs? What is their interest? And really what the ideal outcome is. And reality is about giving feedback and assessing perspective. So you want to ask questions along the line of what steps they might have taken already. So what has worked, what isn't working. This helps you to understand their perspective on what they've done, what's currently happening. Is there more information that I need to know? How could you do some things you haven't?
Oh, we lost you. We lost your sound, Angelina. Okay, looks like she's having some technical difficulties.
Help them.
Oh.
Yes,
you
please.
broke up for a minute. You broke up for a second. We couldn't hear you. I think you're back now.
Okay, great. So when you think about the options, you want to ask questions along the lines of what else? So they've told you some of the things they've done so far. Here is where you get them into the mindset of what else can I try? Where are some areas where I can stretch myself? What are some other opportunities that I can take on? And then the will, this is where you motivate them so that they are leaving with that plan of action. What is my immediate next step? What's a deadline? Let's put some SMART goals behind this. What are resources that can help, that can hold me accountable? How do we track progress here? Those are the kinds of questions you want to ask next. Next slide, please. So we're not actually going to do coaching practice today, but
I think she's frozen again for a second. You guys can begin to start entering your questions in the chat because we're almost to the end of this. Hey, Angelina, you froze again. So I was just letting them know that they can begin to start posting questions that they might have because we're coming to the end of the coaching your team to success portion of the webinar so that we can just get ready for them while you're back. But you're back now. So.
Absolutely.
Skip the coaching practice slides.
Okay, wonderful.
Slides.
Okay, great. So now we're coming to the end, and the last piece that we really want to talk about is how you can grow through feedback. I want all of you to think about a time that you've received feedback and what made that difficult for you. And you can also post that in the chat. What has made receiving feedback difficult if you've had difficult feedback in the past? So think about your own experiences first. I'll give you just a second and we can take a couple comments in the chat. Okay, we can move to the next slide.
Okay.
So I also want you to be considering times where you've gotten constructive feedback that you've really valued. And what made that feedback valuable? I'll just share from my own personal experience. When I've gotten constructive feedback, for me, what has made it very valuable is feeling like the person has taken the time to consider what's going to help my development, what is going to help.
Okay, we lost your sound again, Angelina. We can't hear you. So
scared.
We have a couple of comments. Okay, you're back. You broke up we lost you for a minute.
Oh, please, let's take the comments. Will you share some?
Sure. So when you initially asked about, times when you received feedback and it maybe was not a good experience, Tiffany says delivery is everything. Raisha, knowing that the feedback was not genuine and from a manager that had my best interest at heart, meaning they did not. Yes, absolutely. Tiffany, again, delivery is everything, solution-focused conversations that are strength-based and not punitive in nature. Absolutely. So these are all excellent points. And I think they reflect when the feedback is good, but also when it's not, right? Because when the feedback is good, then you know it's coming from a genuine place, not punitive in nature. But then when it isn't, then those are the things that cause concern and that may not come across in a productive and effective way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think it's important to frame feedback as a gift. And feedback is something that demonstrates an investment that someone has in your development. So as you all have called out, delivery is important. When you truly care about someone's development, you're delivering it to the best of your ability in a way that helps them process and understand what it is you're offering in terms of feedback.
Mm-hmm. We've got another good comment. Feedback with no action on how to correct the issue.
Yes. So that feedback should be something that is constructive. And I think when we think about constructive, that's what it is. It's helping define that action. Aisha, slide.
And Nicole said she did not feel Her report submitted was changed when manager did not know the findings of the case. Okay, we will probably need a little more detail on that, but we're going to move ahead to keeping the balance.
Yeah, so keeping the balance, you want to make sure that constructive feedback is all about sharing both elements. There's one method that's very possible that we hear about a lot, and it's this whole sandwich method. We don't necessarily have to do that. I actually wouldn't encourage that very much, because what can happen is it can become really disingenuous for the people that you're connecting with. So instead, let's talk about a framework that is going to be helpful in sharing feedback. So the formula that we have, we can move ahead to the next slides, is really about another acronym for you, of course, thinking about the situation that's occurred, thinking about what the behavior was that happened, and also identifying what the impact of the behavior was. So what you want to do is lay out all the elements that are a part of the whole situation that you've observed. So you want to describe what that situation is, exactly what you see happening, being really specific and aiming to avoid any generalizations. Then you want to talk about the behavior that you observed, what the person actually did. And what's most important is thinking about, well, what was the impact on the behavior? So in this situation, I noticed this. You did these actions, or you took these actions, and it resulted in X. What could have been done differently? You want to clarify, you want to give options, and think about next steps for improving. Next slide, please. So this is the slide right after this, please. So this is just an example for you when you think about how to give this formula and thinking about what it is to offer developmental feedback. So an example could be, there's two different types of approaches that we're sharing here. And one is thinking about the situation at this investor meeting. You balance sharing out ideas with hearing from the investors nicely. The investor told me, the impact of that was the investor told me that we clearly understood their desires. But when we think about developmental, that's really about sharing along these lines. When you presented the proposal, you presented and held all the questions to the end, but I noticed that the director was really unhappy to wait till the end. What are some of the other options we could have taken? We could have perhaps weaved in questions throughout, offering different options. Both pieces of this feedback is important, because there are times where you want to offer what's necessary to encourage your employees, but we want to make sure as managers that we're not just only doing the motivational speeches, we're also helping our employees grow and deliver the results that we need to move the business forward. So we're getting close again to the end. Feel free to type in your questions, just a couple more slides here. We'll move to the next slide and summarize some things. So it's all about thinking about the mindset that you have when you're sharing feedback. Many of you chatted about the importance of delivery. So being of the mindset that feedback is a gift, it's a positive experience, even when you're sharing constructive feedback, because you're demonstrating your investment in your team and you're showing that you care about their success. You want to make sure that you're prepared. We talked about the tactic around clearing. Some of you mentioned meditating. I mentioned, for instance, putting my phone on do not disturb when I'm entering a coaching conversation, and actually mentally preparing myself if I'm about to enter a conversation around feedback or development for someone on my team. It's also about being yourself. So we don't want to use methods that are disingenuous. We want to make sure that we're offering our honest truth and we are being authentic in the conversation. And you also want to make sure you're considering, and this kind of goes along the lines of active listening, what is the style of the person on my team and how do I relate to that style and adapt as necessary? And you want to make sure that you're sharing positive and motivational feedback as well as constructive feedback when you're sharing feedback. So just to recap, next slide. We talked about elements of a good manager. I want each of you to just be thinking about 2 of these elements that you can make sure you're continuing to incorporate in your style on your team. I also want you to try some of and remember some of the acronyms we talked about today. So on the next slide, we shared the GROW model. So thinking about how to leverage this when you're having a coaching conversation. The next slide, please. And we also talked about a formula for delivering feedback. So this is something that you can immediately put into practice and try. It's the situation, behavior, impact formula. And lastly, I just want to thank you for your time. So we'll open it up and see if any of you have any questions.
And we do have that earlier question that we tabled.
Yes, so we can start there. So one of the earlier question that we tabled was, how vulnerable should you be in sharing and listening, and what happens when managers use your vulnerability against you? So when it comes to thinking about how vulnerable you should be, I think this is coming from the standpoint of someone thinking about upward conversations. That's my interpretation, but please feel free to type in the chat if you're wrong. If I'm wrong. Please think about establishing trust and the importance of building relationships on your team. So that is an ongoing practice, and that's a lot of energy that you have to take as a manager to make sure that you're not just always delegating and directing, but that you're also taking the time to build relationships. So as we think about building relationships, I think about even during this time of the Corona crisis, when you're checking in and having those video conference calls or phone calls or whatever you're having to connect with your team, making sure that it's not all business 100% of the time, actually connecting at a human level, asking members of your team, how are they caring for themselves? Pardon the dog in the background. Asking members on your team, how are they caring for themselves? What are they doing for self-care? And I'll turn it over to Aisha for just a second to answer the rest of that question.
Sure. I think what Angelina said is really spot on. You know, in a professional environment, particularly if it's a higher up or a manager that you are engaging with, you know, you do have to be careful, right? You don't want to have a complete stonewall up and not be in any way, shape, or form vulnerable, but you do have to think about that this is a professional environment. And so I may not, you know, go in and be like, well, yeah, I was, you know, drunk last night and that's why I couldn't finish the report on time. You know what I mean? Like, you do have to, you know, maintain those different, you know, spaces and be vulnerable, but not too vulnerable because you don't want to say or share anything that one might view you differently, for lack of a better term. And again, I think someone kind of responded earlier, you know, that if this particular leader is the type of person that's holding things against you, then they're not a good manager themselves. You know what I mean? And so we have to realize that we
share those slides with them about a good manager. That's what
right. Doing. We can't, you know, as much as we would like, I'm sure, if I were to ask you all right now, have you ever had a terrible manager? Everyone would raise their hand. Right? We have all had a bad manager at least once. Everyone has not taken this course. Everyone has not been trained and studied how to be a good manager. Some people, it comes to them naturally and some it doesn't. So in those types of environments, you have to just take people for who they are, right? And try to make it the best work environment that you possibly can, the best relationship that you possibly can. But sometimes you're just gonna have a tough person to deal with. And so, you know, still maintaining your professionalism, putting out the best product that you can, but keeping in mind that you can't change grown people. And, you know, you kind of just have to do the best you can.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Sometimes it's about creating team culture. And that's a comment in there. And one thing I will just say about that is, remember who you are, no matter what level you are on the team, and remember that you have a power to influence as well. So now that you have this mindset and these skills, you can bring some of this knowledge back to your team and try to be a part of shifting the culture. So if you're finding that you're a part of a team where everyone is not effective at delivering feedback, don't feel that it's necessary to accept that. Instead, think about ways in which you can bring a different level of energy and different tactics to create a better team dynamic. So you have the ability to shift dynamics on your team through your own leadership.
Absolutely.
So I know we're getting close to time, but we did have just a few more questions or really a conversation that we wanted to share with you briefly. If you have more questions, you can put them in the chat, but we're actually going to stop presenting slides and take about 10 minutes to just share with you some of the things that we've found in our own leadership journeys and experiences.
And before I end the share, I just want to put back up our contact slides for anyone who might have joined late, so that you can stay in touch with us. We're transitioning into our founders chat. And so we do want you all to be able to stay connected with us, to share and post about today's experience. So of course we have Angelina Darrisaw. Her information is on the screen if you want to take a screenshot or take a picture, so that you can stay connected with her. And then the next slide is my information, because we definitely want to stay connected with you as well through the Sistahs in Business Expo. Now, before we begin the conversation, I would like to kind of just get a temperature or just find out who was with us. If you are an entrepreneur, can you just say yes in the chat? I'm interested in knowing how many of you are currently entrepreneurs or are aspiring. Maybe you're working on something. Maybe Corona got lit the fire underneath you and is pushing you into entrepreneurship. Okay, we got a lot of yeses, Deborah, Gabriella, Shaniqua, awesome. So I'm sure you both know that both Angelina and I are entrepreneurs, and the Sistahs in Business Expo last year, we began what we call our founders chats, which is when we simply bring another successful sister in business on and just kind of share our story about how we built our brands, how we kind of got to where we are, because we always get those questions. Well, how did you start your business? How did you become successful? What was your process like? What was your journey like? And so we found that this was a good way to allow our audience to hear from others about this. So yes, please also share what your business is, what you do. If you want to share your handles, we are always about supporting and encouraging. So let us know what you do. So today I have the privilege of interviewing very quickly, because we're a little behind, Angelina, and she's going to talk a little bit about her journey in entrepreneurship. So Angelina, can you tell everyone a little bit about how C-Suite Coach came to be, and what that process was like, where the inspiration came from, and all of that?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you everyone again for joining, and I'm glad to just share a little bit with you about some of my personal journey now that we've gone through the slides. But actually the presentation we did just very much relates to my journey. I was working in corporate America for about 7 years. I worked first at ESPN and then at Viacom, and I was able to get promoted throughout my career. And what I found was all of the challenges that I was having at work, or what I was experiencing with people around me, had nothing to do with the actual work. It was always about people issues. So I found myself doing really exciting work, being a senior manager, doing digital business development work, working with cool companies like Snapchat and Twitter. But the people who were coming into my office never wanted to talk about the work. They always wanted to talk about their challenging managers and the fact that they weren't getting promoted. And then I also saw a trend. All of those people were women, people of color, or LGBT individuals. And it became very clear to me that there weren't adequate resources to help us grow and really thrive in our careers. I had leveraged executive coaching early in my career, and I found that it really helped equip me with the tools to continue to get promoted and to do well. And so I wanted to find a way to democratize access to coaching, which is quite expensive if you have any experience searching for an executive coach, and make that more accessible to Black and brown people.
Awesome. So tell us about how you transitioned from having a full-time job and running your business into becoming a full-time entrepreneur. That is one of the biggest questions that we get most often. People are always interested in that story.
Yeah, so I would definitely say, if I could have done it all over, I'll tell you how I transitioned. And I transitioned because my company was experiencing layoffs. And during that time, my boss was actually positioning me to do more work. I found myself in a stage where every week I would say in my own head, ooh, I hope I get laid off, which is just a terrible thought given how disruptive that experience was for some of my colleagues.
Okay, she's frozen for a second. Thank you guys for sharing. Shaniqua with online tutoring, Emanuela the curly code.
I'm not
Aisha,
sure.
forgive me if I'm saying your name wrong, every dope girl. Hey, you froze for a second, so I was just reading some of the comments, so go right ahead.
Yeah, so I just had to have that conversation and be very transparent and honest and say I don't want to continue working. So I actually, because I wasn't leaving for a competitor, I stayed on for a couple more months, which gave me an opportunity to save. And I quit in July of 2015. It's been about 5 years. A couple of things I think are really important when you are preparing your transition. One, you want to get yourself out of debt as much as possible. So I had made sure I paid off all my student loans and my credit card debt was zero. Having a high credit score when you start a business is also important, because your credit score personally is going to be used when you're opening up corporate bank accounts for your business. So it is important to think about your credit and what you're doing in terms of being debt free. You don't need any more debt when you're starting a business. Something else I would say is important is leveraging your network. Your network is going to be critical. Most of my first clients came from people who I had as colleagues. So having your network and sharing with them, drafting your email, get all that ready so that when you leave, you can share with your network how they can support you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, awesome. Shaniqua shared, wow, I got laid off today, and I see it as a blessing, being able to have the time to grow my business and switch it to online tutoring. Wow, wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing that. Also, that perspective is huge. How you see things really is going to determine the outcomes. So the fact that you're already looking at this as a blessing, it will be a blessing for you.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So tell us, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they first start out?
Oh, I would say there's so many big mistakes. And actually, I had a strategy meeting with some of my advisors and mentors this week, and it became clear to me that I failed my way to success, so to speak. And so I say that to encourage you. You are going to make a ton of mistakes. Some of the mistakes I made were bad accounting, wrong legal structure, choosing the wrong clients, taking on more than I should have. All of those at one point I had developed an app and it cost me about $30,000 and I went into significant debt for it. Many different things that I tried that didn't work out. But what I will say is when you make those mistakes, don't just let it be a loss, let it be a learning, because that is going to be what gives you sustainability. And I guarantee you, once you make expensive mistakes, you're really not going to make them again. So try to learn what the mistakes were from as many business owners as you can so you don't make them. But when you do, be gentle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you broke up a little bit on the end, but I think we got the gist of it. What are some of your must-haves as an entrepreneur?
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. What are some of your must-haves as an entrepreneur? You know, whether it be, you know, apps or, you know, anything anything. What are the things you must have that kind of help you to get, to function daily that you would recommend or just share that you use?
One of your must-have is a community of other small business owners who are more seasoned than you. And that's really important because there are going to be things that come up that you just have not experienced before. You need to have some folks who have done it longer that can answer some of those questions for you when they arise. So that would be one of the things I would say as a must-have. Something else I would say as a must-have is a branded email address. You absolutely need a branded email address because it just enhances your credibility with your customers, and it is something that will tell the world that you're a serious business. It's really not expensive. You can get a G Suite account for like $15 a month. So think about making that investment to demonstrate that you are taking your business seriously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any books that you recommend or that have helped you along the way?
So I really like coaching books because I'm in the coaching space. I really like to read about resilience and emotional intelligence. I would say Quiet is a good one about learning about introverted leadership and really how to connect with more introverts. I also like Melinda Emerson's Fix Your Business because she goes through a lot of the things that sometimes you don't recognize you will encounter as a business owner until you get there. So I think reading that help prepare me for certain situations I found myself in. So I would say those would probably be the two categories. I read a lot of coaching books and a lot of leadership development books, and I enjoy those.
Awesome. So guys, we are just about done. We have maybe one or two questions left. So if you have any questions for Angelina or myself as it relates to any part of entrepreneurship, please begin to put them in the comments because we're getting ready to wrap up very shortly. And we do want to get to your questions. So if you have any questions for Angelina or myself about anything related to entrepreneurship, please definitely put them in the comments. What I wanted to ask you, Angelina, is how do you kind of keep your brand fresh or reinvent it? As you mentioned, it's been 5 years. Sometimes when you kind of get into a routine, things can kind of level off or might become stale. How do you keep it fresh? How do you continue to, come up with new ideas and things like that?
Yeah, I think that is such a good question because actually,
Uh-oh. Wait, we can't hear your great stuff, whatever you're saying. We couldn't hear anything. Say it again. I think it's just the signal, the connection.
Am I frozen?
Okay, you're back now.
Okay, good. So thinking about a proactive marketing plan is just really key for your business. Recently, I saw Melanie Fiona post, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if you're not constantly iterating on how you can find new customers, how you can scale up, how you can grow, then you're going to stay flat at the same size or even potentially decrease the size of your customers.
Okay, we're getting a little disconnect again. So we kind of lost the end, but we're gonna get to, we have a couple of questions. Emanuela asks, do we have any tips for effective marketing on a budget?
Yes. So believe it or not, I have been in business for 5 years and I have never paid for marketing ever. So I'll give you some of the key tips that I think are really useful and make a difference because I've actually had significant press. If you go to my personal website, angelinadarrisaw.com/press, you can see some of the outlets I've been featured in. And all of that has been organic media, meaning it's not been paid. So my first piece of advice for you would be to get a free subscription. This is completely free at helpareporterout.com.
Can you repeat that? You froze for a second. A free subscription
Yes.
Of what?
At helpareporterout.com. I'm going to type it in the chat as well. Woo.
Oh, okay.
Help a reporter out. And so what this does is every day there are journalists that they need experts in different topics to fulfill their pieces. And so they're looking for quotes from experts in all kinds of different businesses. So you can establish your credibility and expertise by providing your thought leadership when journalists are looking for industry experts in certain areas. So that would be my first piece of advice. I would also say build relationships. This is probably something I've gotten better at as time has gone on. When you're early in starting your business, you're so in the weeds of getting it off the ground that sometimes you don't spend enough time networking. I think especially in the last 2 years where I've seen the most growth of my business, that's all come from making time, carving out time to build relationships with people, because those are ultimately going to turn into your clients or brand ambassadors that can help your business grow. So I would say for any early stage business owner, don't leave networking as, something that's left for last. Actually have a strategic plan for networking.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I just want to add one thing because I know Emanuela, and I was just about me sharing, but I think that sometimes we miss out on the low hanging fruit, for lack of a better term. Emanuela has this amazing brand called the Curly Code, right? That I had no idea, and I've known Emanuela for years, and I didn't even know that she started this brand. The only reason I came across it was because one of our mutual friends tagged her in a Instagram story. I think sometimes we miss out on the people closest to us, right? When we start something and when we launch something, even though we don't necessarily have to rely on them, but tell your friends, tell your family. When I launched the Sistahs in Business Expo, I sent an email to every single person in my email list, even if I hadn't spoken to them in years, right? It's really important that we begin with the network that we do have, just because we never know how it's going to trickle down, what the trickle down effect might be. So, sometimes it's the simple things that we kind of don't think about because we may not think people might be interested, or we don't, we're so busy, trying to tackle social media. But sometimes it's just a matter of, sending a text to your contacts like, hey, I'm launching this business. Would love your support, or whatever the case might be. Emmanuel said, yes, you're so right. Yes, I know, because you ain't telling me and I was feeling some type of way. Go ahead.
And just one piece I will highlight. I used to be, pardon my dog in the background, I used to be very shy about sharing my business. You cannot be shy. This is your livelihood. Share it with everyone you encounter.
Yes, you have to eat, live, and breathe it everywhere you go. I don't care if you're in line at the grocery store, at the nail shop, everything you talk about essentially should somehow lead back to this is what I've created, because you just never know. You never know how or what that could lead to or connect to. And so it's really, like she said, the shyness has to go out the window. I always hear people say, oh, I'm not a people person, or, I'm good at making my product, but I'm not good at talking about it. You have to get out of that. Like, you really have to train yourself to become your number one spokesperson. No one is going to be more passionate about your brand than you are. No one.
And now there's another question, and I think this might be the last two questions. I'm a recording studio owner, and sometimes finding another recording owner whose experience can be difficult. What do you suggest? So my answer to that would be, if it's hard to find someone who's in your exact space, well, two things I would suggest. One, as a business owner, sometimes you may not be able to find a business owner who wants to share with you. If you can't, try to find someone in the industry, because usually if someone is working for a larger company, they're more open and willing to share their feedback, their resources, their advice. And then the other thing I would say is, if you can't find someone who's doing exactly what you're doing for mentorship, try to find a comparable. So maybe it's not a recording studio owner, but maybe it's someone who's creating another type of content. And then the other just question was, do we have consultations in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy? So the Grow with Google Learning Center offers free one-to-one coaching. It's not available right now. You can sign up for free online in New York City for those of you who are in the New York City market. But once we are back to in-person events, one-to-one coaching will be available for free online if you Google Grow with Google Learning Center.
I think I may have been asking about you and your business. Were you asking about Angelina's coaching? Well, you can reach out to her if you were.
Well, I'm so grateful, Aisha. Thank you so much. We've wanted to do this for a while, and I will just say I gave a shout out because I knew there were some Deltas in the chat for you. So I always love to see AKA Delta Love, and also just again, growing a business is a process. It's one that takes time. I'm 5 years in, and there's still daily struggles. So I just want to encourage everyone who is in that process to remain resilient. I'm going to share, just before my dog freaks out and I have to hop, just one last little anecdote with you. If any of you are drinkers, I'm a liquor drinker myself. And one day I was having just a really hard day. And I went to meet up with some friends at a bar, and I asked for my drink of choice, which is a vodka soda with mint leaves in it. And the person next to me said, no, no, no. My drink arrived, and the person next to me said, no, no, no. Send that back. You need to muddle the mint. That's what they told the bartender. And I was so upset and frustrated because I said, I'm tired, I'm hot, I need a drink, and this person is telling a bartender to muddle the mint when I just want my drink right now. I want it right now. But it took a couple seconds longer, but ultimately my drink came back just a couple minutes later, and it was muddled, and you could really taste the flavor of the mint in the drink because it was muddled. And it was a better drink. It took longer, but it had a better flavor, and it was better than anything I had experienced when it came to a drink. So a little bit of a weird anecdote, but I say that to say sometimes we want the growth right away, and we're tired, and we might have had long days or a long year, and we're like, where is this growth? I want it right now. But things that are more flavorful, things that are more valuable, that you're going to enjoy more, take a longer time. So I just want to really encourage you to continue to be patient with the process, because the end result is going to be better. You're going to be better at it for the experiences that you're going through. So be patient and let yourself be muddled in this process.
Awesome. That was a great closer. Angelina is also a national speaker, and you can see why, because she really can tell an amazing story. Thank you all so much. Kudos to you all for doing this. This is one of the most important pieces that I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss out on, is educating yourself and investing in yourself, your time, your money, your resources. We want to be like sponges. We should be soaking up as much information as you possibly can. Of course, anytime something is free, you want to take advantage of it. But even when it's not, you have to invest in yourself if you expect anyone else to invest in you. So kudos to all of you for taking the time out this night, for hanging in there with us through the technical difficulties. We wish you all continued success. Angelina and I are here as a resource for you. We love for you to stay connected with us and let us know how things are going with you. Quick plug, we do have another webinar tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Tax tips for tough times. And we're going to be talking specifically about some tax strategies for small businesses, particularly as it relates to COVID-19, but also some general tax tips. And so you can register for that on our website as well. I will type the link in the comments right now, and we'd love to have you join us. Angelina, any other goodbyes or closing?
No, thank you so much all for joining. We'll share the recording. Thank you.
Yes, we will share the recording with you. Thank you all again. Have a good night. Thanks, Angelina. Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.